I was 8 the day my aunt dragged me onto the sidewalk for stealing a spoon of milk, one scoop for two babies with hot foreheads. One scoop that turned a kitchen into a courtroom and a child into a defendant. Neighbors peeking through blinds while the word "we come" on a faded doormat felt like the truest thing on the block. I held my brothers close and told them to breathe, told myself the sun would move and courage would show up, and right then, a charcoal SUV rolled to the curb. The window slid down, a man with gray at his temples, and steady hands looked at me like I was a person, not a problem. I said, "Please, sir, a little milk and I'll pay you back when I'm big." And he just nodded like a judge who had already read the file and said, "My name is Samuel, you're coming with me." He wrapped his jacket over our shoulders, checked a fever with the back of his hand, like he'd done it 1,000 times, led me to the car where his two sons sat with clean collars and complicated eyes. Logan raised an eyebrow. Chase sighed like schedules matter more than people. And Samuel said, "Children who need help," then parked at a pharmacy. I had walked past all my life and bought what our kitchen never had enough of: formula and a bottle and a thermometer and tiny medicine that melts under the tongue. He tested the heat on his wrist, fed Noah one careful spoon at a time, told me to keep Eli a little upright so he could breathe easier, and for a whole minute the world got quiet in the way that makes room for mercy. His apartment was 13 floors up and smelled like clean air and butter from someone's breakfast. He laid out a blanket and said, "Tonight you sleep." I tried to stash a crust under the pillow because habits don't care about zip codes. Logan caught me and said, "Use the shelf, not under the pillow. Crumbs attract ants." He left a granola bar and pretended it was nothing, yeah. That happened. While we slept, the other side of my family woke up loud. Valerie and Trent called a lawyer who speaks in straight lines, and a sheriff who likes microphones. They filed words that make good people doubt themselves: abduction, unfit, return the kids. And if you've ever been poor, you know paper can feel heavier than chains. But somewhere else, a detective named Inez Alvarez opened a file on my parents' crash that refused to sit quiet. The new report said, "Hydraulic line compromised before impact," which is a fancy way to say a hand reached into our life before the car ever moved. You know what I mean. Morning building security called up officers in the lobby with a transfer order. Sheriff Rourke stood in our doorway like a bad headline and said, "Sign, and no one gets hurt." Samuel asked for a warrant. I blurted that I wasn't kidnapped, that they rationed milk and poured it out. The elevator dinged like a doorbell from a better future, and Detective Alvarez stepped out with a folder and a spine. She said, "There's credible evidence of harm, and we are not pushing 3 kids back into danger." Rourke smiled the way people smile when they think rules belong to them, and said, "We'll be back," and they were. The twist came fast. Eli's fever spiked like a red alarm, Samuel pointed. Logan Drove Summit Memorial glowed the color of overnight coffee. Nurse Tina moved with a voice that could hold a building up. Dr. Patel ordered meds and monitors and said, "No one leaves." Logan's fist found my hand without asking, and for a minute the room stopped shrinking. And then, in a hallway that smells like sanitizer, I saw Valerie press a stiff envelope into the nurse's pocket, whispering ARC, the chart. Dehydration and neglect. "Make it look like that man can't care for them." Logan stepped from the alcove like someone had pulled a cord. 3 pictures in silence. The envelope, the badge, the hallway sign, he said. "You don't want to be part of this, hand it back, or I send this to security and the state board." Tina swallowed, slid the envelope across the counter like it was burning, whispered. "I was stupid," he said. "Don't be stupid," twice, and texted the photos to Alvarez with a time and a name, and suddenly the story had a backbone. 2 mornings later, we walked into family court, shoes echoing stomachs tight. Samuel's attorney, Erica Shaw, moved like someone who's learned to breathe through storms. Tell the truth, she said, and only what you saw. Judge Naomi Carver sat high above wood, polished by 100 hard days. Peter Lang, the lawyer in straight lines, spoke first and painted Samuel as a lonely man with unverified history who took children without notice. He wanted custody restored to the people who threw us out. And then Erica stood and called me. I gripped the microphone like it might break and said, "If they loved us, why did they measure milk like punishment? Why pour it out on the floor when babies had fevers? Why lock the door and tell us to beg, Mr. Oh." Grant fed them and called a doctor and gave us a room. The gallery murmured like thunder. Rolling down an aisle, the gavel tapped and the air went still. Alvarez placed the break photos and the reinspection report on the tray. Tool marks where no tool should have been. She put down Logan's ER photos and the sworn statement from Nurse Tina, whose hand shook but signature didn't. Chain of custody established, Your Honor. Objection overruled. And when Erica called Logan, he told it plain, I saw. I took the photos, I sent them. He looked at the judge, not at Valerie, and you could feel a line being crossed inside a man who had wanted to be right and now wanted to be good. The judge asked Sheriff Rourke whether he'd traded recommendations with Lang outside proper channels. He shrugged. Like rules are stretchy, and called it cooperation. She called it an admission and wrote it down. Then she read the order like someone drawing a boundary where everyone can see it. Temporary custody to Mr. Samuel Grant under Family Services supervision. No contact for Trent and Valerie. Evidence of suspected vehicle tampering and record manipulation. Referred to the district attorney, Sheriff Rourke. Removed from any role pending review. Bailiff place Mr. and Mrs. Doyle under arrest for suspected child endangerment and obstruction. The click of the cuffs sounded like punctuation at the end of a sentence I had been writing with my breath since the sidewalk. Outside, the wind ran hot over brick. There were no cameras because kindness does not trend on schedule. Samuel held a folder and said quietly, "No one is taking you away this time." I believed him. Months turned like pages, and the apartment learned how to be loud. Chase decided pancakes are a language, and he would be fluent. Logan mastered the bottle shake and pretended to hate it. Grace from Family Services kept us honest and smiled when the boys laughed from their bellies. I drew 6 figures in crayon and wrote home under their feet, and Samuel hung it above the shelf and blamed the onions for his eyes at night on the balcony. We watched the city look like a blanket of cheap stars, and he said, "I thought grief made people smaller. Turns out it can make you big enough to hold strangers. Or maybe they were never strangers." And I said, "Your sons didn't want us," and he said they wanted to be right. Then they wanted to be good. And that's the better feeling once you find it. That's the part everyone loves, the warm kitchen, the high five, the Polaroid, with Samuel mid-sentence and me with a marker stain, and the twins trying to steal the same spoon. But there's a piece that won't sit quiet, the neighbors who closed their curtains. The paper that almost took us back, the lawman who treated kids like paperwork, the line between rules and people that looks straight on paper and crooked in the light. So here's where I leave it open on purpose, because real stories don't end. They just get quieter and wait for your part. If you saw 3 kids put on a curb for a spoon of milk, would you stop? What's the smallest thing you could do today that would still be brave? A call, a ride, a photo that keeps someone from rewriting the truth. Do you think the judge got it right? Would you argue the law should have moved faster or slower? Is family only blood, or is it the people who set a plate for you and tell you to quit pretending you aren't hungry? Drop a comment, argue with me respectfully, tell me a time you were a Samuel or needed one. I read every word, and if you know a house where things are measured like punishment, knock, show up, buy a gallon report. What needs reporting? Sometimes a life turns on less than a spoon. Sometimes justice is a gavel. Sometimes it's a stranger with steady hands who says, "Come with me at exactly the right moment."